One, hey, two, hey, one, hey, two, hey, three, hey, four, hey, ho, hey, ho. Everybody get up. Ho, hey, ho. Everybody get up.
Hey, everybody. It's time for another episode of Actors from the Dark Side. I'm your girl, Rav'n, an actor with passion.
And I'm LaDios Muhammad, actor with purpose.
This is part 2 of our last episode about Underground Railroad, which came out on Amazon Prime and is streaming. I believe they're on their second season. So we're going to dive into episode 2.
Yes.
Episode 1 was great. Thank you for leading that, LaDios.
Oh, sure.
With this episode, what I'd like to do is just kind of take a look at. It was really well done. Mm-hmm. Watching it a couple of times, I'm like, wow, they actually really pushed some issues here. So I'd like to start with just naming some of the historical contradictions that I noticed in the film, which also added to some of the allure of what was actually going on behind the scenes that's deeper, that might be hard to pick up on if you're not really that well versed in slave history and slave knowledge. Yeah. So, the first thing that I noticed, and I believe this child was in episode 1 too, but they have a very well-dressed, maybe 6 or 7 year old who's a driver, who can clearly read and write because he's a scribe, and all of these things. And I sat there thinking to myself, how could this piece of property, because that's what slaves were back then, this valuable piece of property, be moving about so freely, right? Yeah. So did that raise anything for you? Yeah.
So before we bounce off that, I just want to talk about because there's some characters you're going to cover.
Oh, sure.
I'm just going to. In episode 2, these are going to be pertinent because Cora, who is Thuso Mbudo, Caesar, who is Aaron Pierre, Megan Boone, who is Miss Lucy, Will Powder, who is Sam. He's one of the abolitionists. Joel Edgerton, who's Ridgway. He's a slave catcher. Yes. And Homer, the little boy who you're referencing, is Chase Dillon.
Yes. Okay.
So yes, this little. Well, first of all, he's absolutely freaking adorable.
So cute.
You talk about a very stellar young actor. He really had me. I was like, why is he so well dressed and he's hanging out with this slave catcher? And they really did a good job on that. I was super convinced. It just made me think about this little boy. He actually had his freedom. That is revealed. He had his freedom, but he didn't have anywhere to go.
Sure.
So we talk about being slaves and then being free. Well, it's hard to be free when you have no skills or nowhere to go or nothing to do or no one, and all you know is reporting to your counterpart. And so this little boy was in survival mode. He was like, because he tried to free him. The little boy was free. Yep. And Bridgerton wanted him to go. But he did not.
No. And it's really interesting to me. I think one of the things that hit me was that if you're in nefarious business, right? If you're doing kind of yucky work or bad work, that children are usually your best soldiers because they haven't gained the consciousness to really be at battle with themselves for what they're doing. You know, you can very much justify doing these things if you're getting nice clothes and you're getting to drink the whiskey and you're getting to do all, and you're getting, appreciated by these people that are, hurting everybody else around you. So that was an interesting takeaway for me, was that maybe he was brought in so young just because he was so young, because it's easier with younger people sometimes to get them to, go along, right? So that was interesting to me.
Yeah, I hear you. I do, and I'm not sure how far you got. Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but he did free him. He was a free slave, and he told the boy he freed him, but the boy didn't want to go.
Right.
Yeah. And so he was like, I don't know why he wanted to stay with me, And the boy just kept coming back and tagging along. So he had,
Sure.
you're right, to put a young little boy, you can cultivate him,
Mm-hmm.
you know, make him into what you want him to be.
Because that boy wasn't buying his own clothes. You know, that
No.
you know what I'm
No,
saying?
he wasn't.
So, yeah.
And he was brainwashed.
Yes.
He was really brainwashed. That is all he knew.
Yes.
But I think even in the back of his mind, whether he was brainwashed or not, he was in survival mode.
Yes.
I am not going to be a slave again,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have any skills, and I'm going to have this. He actually was kind of clever. I'm going to have this white man take care of me.
He was very clever. And
Yeah.
it's one of the things that drives me crazy when we look back on slave history
Yeah.
is that, you know, a lot of people try to put blacks down for even letting themselves, quote unquote, be slaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, you know, you touched it, right? That it's survival mode.
Yeah.
That yes, you had black overseers because they were surviving. Everybody was in survival mode at that time. So yes, they did things that were sad and despicable and all of those things to our standards today. But sometimes you had to. You had to do that. You had to let somebody have your body. You had to let somebody, you know, work you like crazy. You know, you just had to. There was no choice in the matter. And so many people were in traumatic survival mode at that point in time. So yeah.
Does that make you think of 12 Years a Slave?
A little
and that
bit.
he was, if I have to play the fiddle
Mm-hmm.
or you know the violin, if I have to play it to survive, I'm going to do whatever I got
Yes.
to do so I can free myself.
Absolutely.
That really isn't that? And even today,
Mm-hmm.
as actors, sometimes we'll take a role so we can get a paycheck.
That's right.
Taraji P. Henson has said it several times. She said, I'm not one of those actors. I can go 2 or 3 years, do a blockbuster film, and then I could go not work for 2 or 3 years. She goes, I got to work all day, every day, around the clock. And sometimes she has to take roles that are stigmatized with, you know, the loud black woman. But it gets her paid, you know? So, yeah.
That's such a good point. Yeah. So the other historical contradiction that I found is that at the opening of this episode, we see South Carolina as this beautiful bastion of freedom. You have this theater production going on, and Cora's one of the actors, and you know, and then you see her walking through the streets with a really gorgeous dress on and getting her hair done and going through the marketplace, and you're like, whoa, which South Carolina is this? This isn't what I was told about. So that really struck me in terms of another contradiction. Even seeing black people being able to gain their own way in terms of employment. Caesar now has a job. He's working at that mill and kind of gets in trouble for being able to read. And the one thing that really gets me is during the theater scene, you know, there's a white man who's kind of the director of this theater, and they have Cora in this overly grotesque mask, standing out in a field to be a savage. And, you know, you hear him later telling a group of children that, oh, we got them from Africa and got them to stop speaking that gobbledygook. And did you know that they used to drink out of the heads of skulls? And, oh, you know, and all of this. And then I believe he goes to the actors and says, you know, we need to make this more authentic. We need to really let them see how bad it was in Africa. And he is like, you know, for you, by you, boo-boo. And that, tell me if that touched on your nerves.
That is an incredible historical contradiction, because if I came to this town that is supposed to cultivate me, educate me to read, and I got these beautiful garments on, why am I perpetuating a history that you think you know? And then you're saying, have this more authentic. It's like, bitch, I lived it. I was on the plantation. How much more authentic can it be? So to me, you were still perpetuating that until we got them from Africa.
Yes.
They were savages.
Yes.
And we cultivated them and taught them how to read and how to write and how to put their hairs together and wear their petticoats and dresses. And that was the biggest contradiction I seen in that whole thing. And you pointed something out. why are they using FUBU? Because
Right.
that was Lady, what was her name? Miss Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
This is for you, by you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, now, whoever wrote that shit, you triggered me.
Yep, me too. I got triggered several times.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Good choice. Good,
Yeah,
good
yeah.
one. I
I'm
was
like, who was that? That was our 90s thing, and that's what
like,
we were trying
how
to
dare
create.
you put
Now
that
they're gonna,
associate it with
mm.
wrong!
I
Wrong!
see
So
America.
wrong!
And then the other big contradiction for me was that being able to read was illegal in most of the southern states. After, I think, 1830, and then after 1837, you had Dred Scott, which basically said no matter what, whether you had papers or not, you could still be taken as property. So you don't really get a clear sense of exactly what time period this is, but it does seem a little bit later in the 1800s, closer to the Civil War. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was very interesting, but then I realized, and this is kind of the second segue of what I took from this episode, is that they're in a kind of make-believe South Carolina abolitionist camp, a reformer camp, if you will. So all of these, I don't know, images of kind of freedom and prosperity and all of those things, that's actually being concocted by these really rich abolitionist whites. So then when you start getting that veil pulled away, it makes you view what you've seen in a different lens, and then it starts to make sense.
Yeah.
So like I was wanting to ask you, do you feel like the abolitionists were the antagonist?
So, I'm on the fence.
Because it's like well-meaning white folks.
So with I'm on the fence. I think. Okay, so there's a dual answer. Because Sam, in my opinion, I think he was an innocent bystander. He was not. I believe, at least it's portrayed that I received it that way, that he was an innocent bystander and believer that they weren't doing this. Mm-hmm. That you know, the behind the scenes stuff. I definitely believe the abolitionists were an antagonist. And I don't want to jump the gun because you probably do a segue. Because again, right there, you're cultivating me, but you're still teaching me history.
Yes.
Okay? And then, you know, as we move in, I'll elaborate.
Sure.
They're not doing that for their, you know, just because they want to say, I helped someone. There is an attached factor to why they're doing what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you're going to reveal that. So
yeah, because it could even be a monetary factor,
yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So at one point we see them having a big ball for all of the blacks, and at one point one of the women comes in screaming like a lunatic, where's my baby?
Yeah.
They took my baby.
Right.
And all of a sudden you find out that there are no children in this little South Carolina camp. Yeah. And then you find out that they're trying to sterilize the women in this camp so that they can't have any more children. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that there was a nativist movement. And the word native might confuse you, but basically they were upset that white women weren't able to have as many babies as black women could. Some women on the plantation might have 10 to 15 children back to back, and here's the missus of the house, and she can't even have one. So there was a lot of jealousy over that, you know, supposedly they're God's people, and supposedly they're supposed to have all this prosperity, which is children, and left and right, they're not able to produce. But yet these people that they've enslaved, they're able to produce left and right, and they're able to do this. So there was a huge nativist movement to stop black women from producing offspring. And I think that's kind of what's tied into that sterilization offer with the doctors and everything else there. Yeah. But there's so much like I said, well-meaning white folk, there's so much prejudice that comes through. Like, you find out that these people, yes, they're working for a greater good, but are black people still a problem? Are they still something to be dealt with? Are they, so did you get any feelings like that? Or
Yes. So yes, obviously there was some good, because now they're teaching people how to read. But when Cora went into the store to ask about the penny candy, and the owner was like, we don't have any penny candy. She goes, well, why wouldn't you? Because she sees a store across the street where there's white kids purchasing penny candy. And then it triggered her, and she realizes there's no children, black children. And Miss Lucy was like, well, if you were going to go off to this town, you can get married and have children, but you don't have to worry about that. She goes, but it's my choice. And she said, well, you're going to go ahead and do the procedure. She goes, no, I was told it's my choice. Now, when I said there was an attachment factor to whatever they were doing, one, they were experimenting on the men to see how much a black man, or a specimen as they would think him to be, can endure.
Yes.
So they were poisoning him. Now, what I want to know, when you talk about antagonists, was that store owner an antagonist? Did he know those herbs that he was giving to those black men were poisoning them?
I wonder that too, because
I bet you God bless him,
they didn't have no damn penny candy, but they sure as hell had a whole lot of liquor. And that also stood out to me.
See?
So,
And they still perpetuate this crap today in our communities.
yes, they do.
And but you know what? As a responsible citizen, we have not protested against to get those liquor stores out of our community. But going back to that, the attachment factor is when that woman yelled at the ball, they took my babies! They took my babies! So she had children.
Yes.
She had babies. And I bet you they sold them into slavery.
Yes.
So yes! I think they were antagonists.
A child slave, a baby slave with legs and arms, that was as much as a house.
Yes.
That's how fucking valuable we were.
Yeah.
That was the price of a goddamn house. So you better believe they were turning a profit on this quote-unquote camp,
Oh, of course.
And at the same time trying to brainwash and get the blacks under them to...
And experimenting.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Bull snap.
It was a
It
lot.
was bull snap.
It was. It's a whole lot of bull snap.
So, my stepmom would always say, all that glitter ain't gold.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? If something doesn't look right or seems too good to be true, it's probably not
Yes,
good.
yes, absolutely. So those are some of the interesting contradictions and then things that jumped out, because once you actually realize what's going on in this episode, you almost have to go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, oh my God, now this makes sense. And I'll be the first to admit that the first time I watched it, I was like, huh? And then watching it again, I was like, oh, wow. So that's really interesting. Now, at the end of the episode, you have Ridgway and the little boy come back, because now they've tracked Cora down. And I believe Miss Lucy sells the whole thing out, doesn't she?
She got busted because he was like, I can fine you. So when it comes to your reputation and messing with your camp of experiment, you're going to give away that slave. So, Cora goes on the run. Unfortunately, she can't connect with Caesar. And it's interesting because when they confronted Sam, he said, Sam, I thought you said this place was safe. And he said, I was, and then Cora was like, no, I don't want to hear it. Like, you don't know the town that you're taking us to. You didn't investigate. You have no knowledge. And so I'm still in question, but on the fence.
Yeah.
Because the look that he gave was like, I didn't know. Well, and he was trying to get him to the next railroad, which, by the way, let's talk about that.
Can we talk about that? Because the Underground Railroad was not a literal goddamn railroad. Like, it was not. It was not a train, damn it. Nobody caught a train, okay? Now, they referred to themselves as cargo, as freight, as those things, but the Underground Railroad was actually a series of paths and a network of people that got people from one place to the other. Yes. So I did kind of hate that. And again, I know you haven't read the book.
Mm-hmm.
I've read the book. I was talking to Mr. King about this earlier,
Yeah.
that there were just a lot of glaring, I don't know,
Contradictions.
misfacts. Yes, and contradictions.
This is called the contradiction.
And I told Mr. King, I said, it's impossible. It's impossible for us in this day and age, having the rights that we have and the wherewithal that we have, to even put ourselves into that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it's the same for you, Whitey. Because, I'm like, everybody wants to make it like this cute little fairy tale of, oh, it was wonderful. And even, white people have a great way of trying to glorify slave days.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, you guys were turned into monsters. The whole damn practice was monstrous. And nobody was happy. It was bloody. It was horrible.
And then, you know what? I want to elaborate when you say they're monsters, because with Dred Scott, like I had to do a little research.
Mm-hmm.
I know Black history is not my strongest point, although I do love it. I'm not afraid to look through it. But I was looking at how he was sold into slavery, and he had 3 or 4 different masters.
Mm-hmm.
And then his final master, I can't remember her name, but she didn't even want to give him up.
Yeah.
She never even want to give him up.
Mm-mm.
But going a little bit back and then bringing it back to her, because we were saying how evil she was, how evil white people are, because her husband had died, and she inherited the slaves in the land, but slaves were considered a commodity of wealth.
Damn straight.
And she did not want to give him up. What made her give him up was when she married again, and he was an abolitionist.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, it would be very contradictory for me to be promoting freedom of the slaves, and you have one. So
Right.
she said, if I sell my slave, they're going to have to give me at least a year's worth of wages that I'm going to lose, which
Yes.
is $750. That was a lot of money back then in the 1800s.
So much money. Yes.
I don't know, what is that worth? Like
That would have been a
500?
car. That would have been like a car. That would have been like a really nice
50,000,
car. Yeah.
100,000.
Yeah, around 50,000, 65,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
So-
50,000 was like around 100,000.
Yeah, and so I was like, wow. But reading Dred Scott, again, this is a mentality thing that I struggle with, especially when I watch these damn shows.
Mm-hmm.
Like you had mentioned in our previous part 1, there's like 1,000 slaves. And it's like 5 slave masters, maybe
Yes.
their little family. Why are you guys not raising up?
Right. Isn't that sad? And that is the sad thing.
Yeah.
And it's just, so much of it is ignorance
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
But
they
Dred
kept
Scott-
us deaf and dumb, right?
Yeah.
That's so much of the plantation,
Yeah.
is to keep you deaf and dumb. And there was I was reading a book recently, and I got really offended because it was actually a book talking about addictions, and they were talking about technology addiction. But the way that they opened the chapter was with a quote from some Indian person, Middle East Indian,
Yeah.
who said, the difference between technology and slavery is that at least the slaves knew they were slaves. And I'm like, BS. Because that's so much of it. Harriet Tubman has been known to say, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if they just knew they were slaves.
Right.
That so many people got consigned to this thing of, oh, this is my family. This is my home. This is just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if conditions weren't that bad, so that's where it was so, like, I don't know, it's so evil when you think about it, like,
It was
and how everybody
calculated.
was, yes, and how everybody was kind of prey to it and prey to the thinking. So it's
Yeah.
baffling, isn't it? It's
It is.
it's
Because when you
mind-boggling.
mentioned Dred Scott, although he went to trial, I was reading, there were on 3 occasions he was in a free state, and he could have just said, "I want to be free," but he didn't free himself. And then you wait to the end, and when he finally got free, he lived 1 year
Yep,
after his
that's right.
freedom. 1 flipping year, and I'm like, what would make someone stay with an abusive person? And it's calculated.
It is. It's calculated.
Incredibly calculated. They put the slaves in the slave house, the
Yep.
slaves in the fields.
Yep.
The light skin, the dark skin, the young, the old, the children.
Yep.
The intelligence.
Yep.
Because there were the children that they did specifically teach, that were in the house. undercover, and then they had the light and the dark skin, the color. They separated in a. They just,
and then put us against each other.
Yeah.
Because usually, the house Negro wasn't talking.
you had a black overseer too.
Yeah.
You seen them?
Oh,
Because remember when they pulled Cora out of her house?
So many times you
They
had
pulled
black.
Cora out of her house.
More
It's like,
often than not. And what did he get? He got extra whiskey rations
Yeah.
and usually his pick of whoever he wanted to screw. And that was enough for him to keep everybody else in line. And sometimes that's as simple as it is. When we look at the entertainment industry, when we look at some of these fools that get all this money for whatever rap thing and they're gone a year later, it's like, it's because they're playing into the tomfoolery. They're playing into the image like Lil Wayne.
You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled.
I don't like
my
him.
son turned me on to something.
His music's fine.
He is a
His
brilliant
music
man.
is fine.
He is not
Him
from this
as a
world.
person. But him as a person,
He's
no.
he's
His
a little
music
odd.
is fine, but him
Yeah.
as a person, he perpetuates the image that they want other young black men to follow in. I'm out for mine, I'm doing the scissor up, I'm doing this, and all of that. And it's like, oh, let's throw all the money at him because he's telling these ones how to think and how to act. And so it's like, that's why we don't have scientists making tons of money in this country. That's why we don't have people of, like,
teachers.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly, because it's like, it all feeds into this mentality in America. And it so goes back to slavery, unfortunately, because so much of slavery was about errors and pomp. And, like all of a sudden you have 1,000 people in your back, well, that makes you a millionaire, whether or not you actually have any money. So it's very interesting.
I do want to say, I'm wondering why are they promoting all of these historical stories now? What are you still trying to perpetuate? Like when we were younger, we had roots. We're still seeing these stories,
right?
But they're not showing stories of who we were before slaves,
right?
So that is still something of food for thought.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, they're trying to change.
They
the
are,
narrative.
and they do it. They do it on the backs of. If you think back to even Roots, they did that on the backs of civil rights, right?
Yeah.
And then here you have all this progress with Black Lives Matter, and
Right.
people starting to view us different. Then it's like, oh, here's all your slave. Here's who you are.
Yeah.
Don't forget. That's almost what it's what it reminds me of.
Did you have any more stuff that you want to say? Because I did want to leave a very food for thought for our young generation, for those who are, you still have that mentality like you can't win against
Give
white
them the
supremacy.
food for thought, girl.
Yeah.
Give them the food for thought.
Here's something I want to point out. Just watching these slaves movies, they would trigger me and make me angry. But when you start to go in with a different lens and you look at society and how they, they kind of pimp black people a lot. Okay? Their songs, their music, they sell chicken, they sell Doritos. But let me tell you something. If you get smart and you really know who you are, for someone to be sold at $750 in the 1800s, and someone that you're going to want me to promote your chicken for $200,000 or $300,000, what does that say about the value of who you are as a black person in America? If you take that knowledge and really understand who you are and how valuable you are, eliminate the fact of being slavery, get out of that.
Yeah.
Think backwards.
Yes.
When we were kings and queens, then you can really stand in your truth and the value. And then when you see these shows of Underground Railroad and Roots and whatever else they're going to come out to keep kind of get that. Sometimes especially when you're young, that can make you fearful. But to keep you stagnated, you need to come out of that and elevate yourself and just realize how valuable you are as a black person.
Yes.
I am worth more than silver and gold that comes from the earth. Wow. And this damn show proves it. And
Yes.
every other show that you see proves it.
Yes.
So that's my food for thought with these historical contradictions
Yes.
of the Underground Railroad. And thank you, Nick, Again, if you see another episode you want us to cover, we'll do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we're going to cover all of them.
And that goes for everybody. Like, you know, if you're watching what we're doing and you like what we're bringing out in terms of our content, make suggestions.
Yeah.
Put it in the comments. Like, we are more than happy to give our viewers what they want. So, yeah, if you guys have stuff for us, we're more than happy to tackle it and take it on. So,
Well, thank you for watching part 2 of the Underground Railroad. Remember, you don't have to be asleep to dream, so get up and get out and do something for yourself. I'm LaDios Muhammad, an actor with purpose.
and I'm Rav'n Moon, an actor with passion, and
we are
actors from the dark side.
Are we
Taking
recording?
away everything. Like, you know, there is a quilting company, and the name of it is, I want to say it's either Queen Martha or Aunt Martha. It's Aunt Martha. And now, of course, it's a silhouette of some old white lady. But I was reading back in one of my old slave narratives that there was a slave called Aunt Martha.
No.
And she would quilted so amazing that she actually got one of her quilts featured in Queen Elizabeth's castle. And she's the mother of quilting. And yeah, so they've taken every accomplishment, every little thing, you know, and then attribute it to themselves.
They would even put it in
And
Smithsonian.
hell no,
I read
hell
that.
no.
Yeah, they would even put it in there.
That's crazy.
It's crazy though. It's crazy. So yeah, when you find out how much, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
I just had to let her get
Yeah, no,
that.
this is good.
Good one.
We were just kind of putting some fun stuff at the end of the video, but we also wanted to try, you know, see us with our glasses on. I wanted to wear them, but they had like a glare, but we're girls who read, and we're smart.
Occasionally. Just kidding.
Did you have a good time
Usually
today?
I'm busy talking.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You had a good
sometimes.
time? We had a good time.
Y'all got y'all's naughty
That
girl
was great.
glasses.
Yes.
I know, right?
Hey, Mr.
Come
King,
to the library.
meet me in the corner of the library. Hey.